I'm this one guy. I'm on a 5-year-old laptop. I'm paying $12 a month using free WordPress software. And I just saved hundreds of people from losing everything.
Hey everyone, this is Genevieve McDaniel with Franchise Reality Check, and I am here today with Sean Kelly of Unhappy Franchisee. Sean has been somebody that I have looked up to throughout my whole advocacy process and was one of the big reasons why I switched over into doing what I'm doing now versus being a franchisee. I saw a real need for franchisee advocacy, franchisee education first, because I was seeing too many people just lose their life savings, losing their homes, signing up for SBA loans that eventually they couldn't cover, and just really being in a bad situation with no house, no business, no savings. And Sean Kelly is somebody that really writes about a lot of these bad franchisors and goes into a lot of detail about them on his website, unhappyfranchisee.com. So here's Sean Kelly, and I'll let you give a little background on yourself and how you kind of got started and what you do.
Well, thanks for that intro. As a little disclaimer, I never talked you into doing this for a living, correct?
Correct.
I may have inspired you, but I certainly wouldn't try and sell people on doing this. And so I applaud your courage and really am glad to have you as a colleague and a co-rabble rouser. I'll give you a little bit about my background, but when I started Unhappy Franchisee completely by accident, there were probably 4 or 5 other websites where franchisees could go and share their experiences or their opinions. It's a grind, and you have to really be committed to it as you've already experienced, because a lot of people don't want franchisees to have a voice. It's a continuation of a process that began years ago with NDAs and playing games with the FDD to try and keep franchisee information out of there. The FTC says in their guide to Consumer's Guide to Buying a Franchise, the most important thing that you can do in your due diligence is speak to current and recent franchisees to the extent that it's required information. But over the years, there hasn't really been any enforcement, or they haven't stopped people from doing these workarounds. Like in the item 20, they say often, well, here's the people, here are the franchisees. By the way, you probably can't talk to a lot of them because they've signed agreements, but here's their information. And when you really think about that, and you think about how many military veterans and military families are being targeted, which is a prime group for franchise prospecting, you're telling military veterans that they don't have the right to speak to people who may have information that's material to their decision. And once you sign up, these military veterans don't have the right to share their experiences or share their opinions publicly, which is just atrocious. Your site, my site, were sort of the last holdouts because they haven't mastered shutting down dialogue on the internet. But they're trying. But they're trying.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what originally motivated you to start Unhappy Franchisee? Like, were you a franchisee? Were you in business? How did that get started?
It was completely an accident. So prior to this, the way I got into franchising was around 1988. I took a job. I'm a writer. I got a master's degree in English. I taught college English. I was always a writer, and I'm supposed to be on a mountain right now, writing amazing novels and short stories and epic poems. But somehow I ended up having to get a job. And so I took a job as a copywriter at this company called Francorp in 1988 in the south suburb of Chicago. I had never been anyone interested in franchising or even interested in business, but it was a boom time. And this company had 130 employees putting together franchise programs. And our nearest competitor had 7. And we put together franchise programs for like every major oil company. I mean, if somebody was using consultants, we got all the big ones. And, today I can drive down the road and it's like, yeah, Buffalo Wild Wings or Jimmy John's or, Jersey Mike's or just so many of those were our clients. So I got this immersion in franchising. And then I went to work for Auntie Anne's Soft Pretzels, which was one of our clients. It was just getting started. And what really drew me to them was they were very ethical. And I moved to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and 2 others from that company did. And it was the philosophy of, this company would do anything for their franchisees. I mean, there was no question. And most of them were very successful. And when somebody wasn't successful, there was no limit on what. I mean, I remember getting into a van with a pretzel cart, driving to Michigan and spending a week with people who were having a problem there in Michigan, meeting with the mall managers. And it was really the most successful and enduring franchise launched in the 90s. Paralleled at the same time with Quiznos, which was not ethical. And did not operate on that. And they went meteoric into the thousands and then plunged to probably a few hundred today. But so that was, we really saw how franchising could work the way that everybody describes it. Today on Facebook, we're still all in touch with the people who, the early franchisees. I've got a group called Auntie Anne's Early Years. And their grandkids are running these stores now. And it really is like a family that you see everybody talk, you join our franchise family. That really was one.
I had a similar experience, but as a franchisee, being with an amazing brand in Domino's, which I know in their early years, they had some struggles with the franchisees, but I felt like they really turned it around. And I always felt very supportive going through my 10 years with Domino's. They were always there. Even executive leadership would visit my store.
Did you know Frank Meeks, the Washington, D.C. Domino's franchisee?
Mm-hmm.
Later on, after I left Auntie Anne's, I started a company and we ran a lot of conventions. I hired him maybe 4 or 5 times to do, and he would do the same presentation, but it was really good. He was hard on franchisees, telling them to keep it simple, stop demanding more stuff from the franchisor, focus on your own operation. And, he only wanted to sell pizza and Coke, and he would probably do away with the Coke if he was very focused and really good, really great speaker. And he wasn't an apologist for the franchisor. He was always like, hey, keep in mind, they've got their own agenda. They've got their own profitability. They've got their own shareholders. But, it should work both ways, and it should, they're not there just for your benefit. They're there to make money too, but there should be give and take. That was, my understanding. So then I left Auntie Anne's, but I kept them as a consulting client. I started a company called Idea Farm, which was like an outsourced marketing department / advertising agency for growing franchise companies. And we would work as an outsourced department, for McAllister's Deli was, getting started and they were getting going. We were like, they would just call us and I was their director of marketing, but I was director of marketing for 4 or 5 different companies. I'd manage their ad funds and do their consumer marketing and help them grow with their other marketing. But, I'm a writer and blogging. 2006 was getting big, and 2006, 2007. And I can't remember how, but there was a company called B5 Media out of Canada. And they had this 300 blog network, and they had some of the top bloggers in the country, and they wanted to put together this business channel. And, I proposed to them to do one on franchising, and they approved me. I started what would become the top blog in their business channel. But at the same time, it always bothered me that people would never act like there were bad franchises. In the industry, there's this kind of unwritten rule that nobody ever says there's a bad franchise. One day, for example, the brother of one of the top bloggers in the country, Robert Scoble, who is part of Microsoft, good friends with Bill Gates. They said, hey, you know what? His brother got screwed by this franchise called Cuppy's Coffee. Well, it was called Java Joe's. He got screwed by Java Joe's, and he went back to get his money back. He had an agreement that said, within a year he could get his money back if he didn't find a location. He got there, and the signs were changed to Cuppy's Coffee. And they said, well, no, we're not. That was Java Joe's. We're Cuppy's Coffee. It had the same little character. And it was all the same people sitting at the same desks, but now it said Cuppy's Coffee. But I put up a post that said, hey, you know what? If you're going to screw over a franchisee, make sure his brother isn't like the most powerful blogger in the world. Like this guy, he put this thing on his blog and everybody in the world knew about it. And I got this email, we had just started. I didn't even know anybody was reading this stuff. I really didn't have any idea anybody was reading this. And within hours, I got this is Cuppy's Coffee's legal department. And you either take this down, or we're going to sue you into oblivion. And I could tell they used libel or slander the wrong way. So I knew it wasn't really a lawyer. You told me not to do something. I proceeded to write, not exaggerating, 130 posts about Cuppy's Coffee over the next year and a half. It was in Franchise Times. It was everywhere. Turned out it was the guy, Java Joe's guy, went to prison. It was a scam, It was like they were just taking people's money, and probably 500 people lost their investments before, we really got the word out and stopped it. And, it was terrible. It was terrible. Some people, the lucky ones were not getting open. The ones who actually got a place and opened up, they were the ones who lost $500,000. And so my partners at B5 were like, this is great. We appreciate this, but, you can't talk about, if you talk about people losing their homes, we're not going to be able to sell advertising for people to buy a franchise. Just tone down the negative stuff. I'm like, okay. Well, the next thing I know, it's 2007, and there's a franchise called I Sold It, all one word. Did you ever see this one? Somehow somebody's operating with the same trademark. I don't know how, but so I Sold It was, it's ludicrous from the beginning. eBay was built so that you could sell stuff yourself without a middleman. So what these guys did was they came up with the idea, hey, what if we open a brick and mortar store? We add all the costs and the complications of a brick and mortar store, and they sold it as a franchise. And it was a hot franchise. It was the number one top new franchise in Entrepreneur magazine for 2007. And it was everywhere. It was full page ads. I'm thinking it was on the cover. But it was on the cover of some magazines. It may have been on the cover of Entrepreneur. And amidst this, people could bring their stuff in, and they would take the picture, write the stuff, and sell it, and they would split the money from eBay. Which is, from the face of it, by now, it's like you look at stuff and you're like, oh, within 2 minutes, it's like, this is a loser. But I didn't know. So I got this letter. I got a tip from a franchisee. And these guys were selling. It was everywhere. It was the biggest thing. And Entrepreneur, they had some deal with Entrepreneur because they were all over it. I got this letter that's, it was from the CEO to the franchisees in writing, which was the unbelievable part. And he said, look, I know nobody has made any money. I know people are losing their homes. I know people are losing their investments with this, but if you sue us, I'm just going to bankrupt the bankrupt and nobody's going to get anything. And he sent this to all the franchisees. There were 200 or something. And this is at the same time I'm looking at Entrepreneur, and they've got these seminars around the country, all over the country set up that they're bringing people into. And this guy is, and I'm like, can I post this? I didn't really know the legality but I was kind of like, screw it. I posted it. And Don Snagowski jumped on it of Blue Mau Mau, and the two of us kind of put this out there, and they stopped franchising within 2 weeks. The CEO was actually he was being interviewed, and they asked him, well, what about this unhappy franchisee thing? And he says, well, just read it. He's like, you want to know about that? Just read it. And he kind of publicly said that we stopped their franchise program. And I had sent this to Entrepreneur, and to their credit, they pulled them, and they pulled. So like in 2007, if you go back and you look at top new franchises, it starts on number 2. It couldn't change the lettering.
When you are instrumental in getting a franchisor to shut down, and ultimately then they stop defrauding people, is that a win for you? Is that like the ultimate win, or is there levels
Absolutely.
of wins? Like if you can save 10 franchisees from buying a bad franchise, that's a win.
Absolutely. And what was, and it's not so much an ego thing. At that time, if there was a light bulb, that's when the light bulb went on. And it was like, oh my God, I'm this one guy. I'm on a 5-year-old laptop. I've got, the lowest hosting program. I'm paying $12 a month. I'm using free WordPress software. And I just stopped, something. I just saved hundreds of people from losing everything. And I mean, and you know this, and if you haven't seen a lot of it yet, you'll see a lot of it. I mean, I've seen everything. I've had people on the site where, you've got dialogue, and all of a sudden one's not there anymore. And what happened to her? And she took her life. And it's like, I clown around a lot with this stuff, and I try and keep it sarcastic. I try and keep it light. But, this is serious stuff that they're doing to people. You're on that. I never was a franchisee. You were. And, it's like, you're pulling people in, and it's not all about money. It's about trust, and it's about people's belief in other people. And it's about, just some people are just like, they just can't get past the fact somebody looked them right in the eye and lied to them.
One story that always stays with me is the Quiznos franchisee.
Oh, God, Bob Baber.
Tiffany Cianci, yeah. There was a second one that took his life here just in the last few years. And Tiffany Cianci, I'm sure you're familiar with her. She has done several videos and stories about him and his story and the aftermath with his wife, and just having to deal with what Quiznos sales team did.
I was blogging on Bob Baber. He was in California, and he was a Quiznos franchisee, and he was just he was a great guy. Everybody loved him. And he was not like a firebrand, like I am, he was just a really responsible operator and a father of 2. And they put together this group called the Toasted Subs Franchisee Association. And these guys, I think there were maybe 10 operators who owned 17 or more Quiznos, and they were suing Baber, and they just used every trick in the book. I mean, they're a big law firm, and these guys are experts at destroying people's lives. I mean, I'm up against it, and I'm seeing it, and you got to hand it to them. I mean, they're evil geniuses at manipulating the system. And so they would change the venue, and they would drag it out, and they would just drain his resources. And then they would change it to challenge it. And then they would have to I think the final straw was, I think they were going to move it to Colorado. They were going to have to prosecute it and move it to Colorado. And he just had enough. He wrote a long letter and went into the bathroom in a Quiznos, in a neighboring Quiznos, and shot himself. And it was just so tragic, and he had like this 3-page letter. The association, at his wife's permission and I think at her urging, published the letter on their Toasted Subs website. I think they posted it on a Friday, and on Monday, their reaction was to terminate everybody in that group. 10 franchisees who owned like 17, I think, franchises, and terminate them immediately. And they were supposed to stop right away, like close your doors, cover your sign, you're done. And that was their sympathetic reaction to having driven this guy. And, the franchisees got, they got that overturned by a judge, and they ended up going on and they were allowed to open. But it just shows you, it's very demonstrative. Like, it's all about money, and it's all about, and, Tiffany went through the same kind of a thing. And I think that was the same law firm.
And it's ongoing. She's still battling all of that. DLA Piper is at the helm of all of that. It's just complete lawfare is really what it is.
Yeah. And those guys, I think they were part of, I think it was Rudnick and Wolf. And anyway, Lou Rudnick and a lot of those guys who led to that are actually the creators of the modern franchise structure and how things progress like that. It's exclusive to franchising. These are people who they don't care. And they've got a population of people who are admittedly inexperienced, lack business experience, trusting by their very nature. I was one of the top franchise recruitment marketers in the country. I probably had written more franchise brochures by the time I left that consulting company than anybody in the industry. And so I went to I used to run seminars and go to all of them. And everybody told me from the sales, this is what you want. You want the A students. You want the rule followers. You want the people who don't ask a lot of questions. And that's why you want veterans. You want veterans because they're used to structure. They're used to following orders. Later on, you learn that there's also other traits. Somebody's been in the Navy for 20 years. They're used to not complaining. They keep their head down. They keep their opinions to themselves. Are bred for conformity. They take a lot of the blame themselves, even when it's obvious that they bought into something where 80% of the people are failing. It's just something they have this propensity. They blame themselves for it. I mean, I've gone deep into this J-Dog thing where sold over 400 and more than 300 of them have just magically disappeared, have failed, and they resell the territories. All veterans, military families. And still, I mean, I'm in touch with many of them, but you don't see them posting anywhere. They don't post anywhere. They only go through me and give me but they're just not the kind of people who are going to demonstrate, which was mind-boggling to me because I thought, man, we're going to get a couple of tanks and we're going to go storm the office. And it was the exact opposite. They're wonderful. They're wonderful people, but they're not firebrands. They're not revolutionaries. They're rule followers. And that's what they love. And they get taken advantage of for that reason. And that's why it really makes me sick. It's not so much, in my opinion, that, we're these great people, we stop these scams. I mean, you're not going to get a lot of credit from anybody. So you sort of have to brag about your wins.
So what do you say to those people who are saying that the things that you talk about are outliers? They're not the norm. They're not part of the normal course of franchise business, and that franchising is safe.
Well, unfortunately, it's gotten worse and worse over the years. And that took me 10 years to get that one stopped. And it's become more institutionalized as the FTC has had fewer resources to do enforcement actions.
And that's also subject to whatever current administration is running things.
It is, but we saw before the last administration change, we saw some real progress. But really, in the grand scheme of things, most of the progress was the fact that they were giving a voice to people, that people could submit videos and they were publicizing some of those problems. There really wasn't a lot of enforcement still. I mean, they would come down on somebody when the damage was done, like Burger IM, and it would come down too little too late. So people there, it wasn't their fault. They're well-meaning. They just don't have an enforcement mechanism built in to that, and they don't have right of private action for the franchise rule. And the franchisors have caught on, and they realize that, and now with these brokers, it's very lucrative to be a franchise broker. And you don't even have to sell. All you have to do is refer somebody to either a franchisor or one of these franchise sales organizations like Franchise Fastlane or Rhino 7. And those guys will close the deal and pay these brokers $30,000 or $40,000 for every deal. And brokers are like, hey, we didn't even sell the thing. All we did was like refer you, and we don't read the FTD. And you look at their disclaimers, it's like, well, what do? You act like you're experts. You act like you're consultants. They call themselves franchise consultants. They don't call themselves franchise brokers.
Or they also call them business mentors. I've run into that quite a bit. And it creates this illusion that this person is going to be there for you even after you sign your contract and you've got operational trouble, and say the franchisor is not as supportive as they originally indicated that they would be. These people are expecting their business mentor to step in and guide them in a certain direction to help them out. And the mentor, who is, of course, a commission broker, has disappeared because they got paid.
Yeah, they got paid. They're down the road and they don't want to face it. There's this vast gray area. Don't ask, don't tell. They don't have to publish. They don't have to share who they placed, what their rate of success was. And I think that's the biggest thing for what we've got to get the information and warn people, is that it's just this system-wide deception. And they're not consultants. They're as much consultants as the car salesman when you go into the Toyota dealership. At least car salesmen are honest. You go into a Toyota dealership and the salesman doesn't mind saying he's a salesman, doesn't mind saying he represents Toyota. He's not going to say, I'm going to find you the best car of every brand, any brand. I'm going to find you the one that matches perfectly, which is what the brokers do. They act like, well, we're going to go through the universe of every franchise and we're going to find you the perfect one. No, we're going to go through the few hundred that we have commission arrangements with. And if you don't want one of the ones that we're commissionable on, we're not work with you on it, and we're not going to recommend it. We're going to talk you out of it. And they're not realizing that. One of the biggest myths of franchising that has really gotten lost since I started is that track record and experience is what matters the most in franchising. The way franchising works, people have to understand, is you're supposed to get these benefits. And those benefits are, this is a proven system. This is it's a well-known brand. We've been through good times, we've been through bad times, and we have refined these systems so that you get the benefit of our experience, like McDonald's would. And these benefits outweigh the other things, which is you have to pay us these franchise fees. You have to pay us this royalty. You have to give up your freedom. You have to give up the ability to make your own decisions. You have to be a good soldier and do what we tell you. And you have to wear our uniform. And in a good franchise, that's going to not just even out. The good side of it has got to outweigh 15, 20% that you're paying off of your gross for things and giving up your right to buy stuff where you want to buy it. So there's no such thing as a hot new franchise because you're not getting those benefits. If somebody comes to you and goes, hey, we've got this red light beam sauna. It might work, it might not, but you don't have a track record. You don't have those refined systems. You don't have that safety net. And the franchise fees are higher than McDonald's, and they don't have 50 years of operating experience. It's a crapshoot.
I think the other thing that franchisees need to think about when they're looking into buying a franchise is the longevity of the idea. So you mentioned, the red light therapy. Well, nowadays you can get quality institutional style red light masks for your home use. So to me, it makes zero sense to invest in a red light therapy spa franchise. The things like the dog poop scooping, hang a shingle that says I will scoop your poop, do some marketing on Facebook or Google, and then keep the franchise fee and the royalties for yourself. Invest that back in your business. We talk about how we're buying the system. Well, what kind of system could you have for washing windows? What kind of system could you have for picking up dog poop? Why is that worth $60,000 and 5% or whatever the royalty is?
Not only 5%, but 5% for 10 years.
Plus advertising. Then their advertising fund, really nothing goes into local advertising. It's all national and what the franchisor believes will benefit their business. And a lot of them I find are putting it towards recruiting new franchisees. I have franchisees that request an accounting of the ad fund, and franchisors just flat out refuse to give it to them. Even though it's written in the contract, you are entitled to getting a breakdown of what we spend your money on. And they just, no, what are you going to do about it?
And that's the kind of thing where when I started, franchisors had this attitude that they had to comply with stuff like that. They really had much more respect because there was more oversight, and there was oversight and on the state level too, that would come up. Somebody would call them on that. They could get called on that. And that was one of the clear-cut ones. Some of the tool companies got into trouble for that and then just kind of stopped. And now they just sort of laugh. Yeah, right. I'm going to give you that. When I was consulting, that was a big deal. Like I would manage their ad funds, and I was no nonsense. I was like, no, you can't use that. Came into one and they were like, every time they would open a new restaurant, they would give them this corporate gift. They would give them this neon sign as a present, and from the corporation, and they would present it at the grand opening, and they make a big deal out of their generosity. They were taking the money out of the ad fund. I was like, you can't do that. Like, you're giving them this gift. You're taking the other franchisees' money and giving it to them, and you can't take credit for that. And I worked for the franchisor, but franchisees knew that I was looking out for them, or else I couldn't have done that job, because you can't have a bunch of griping franchisees questioning you. And so that's where I kind of developed this attitude towards franchisors. Like, you got to do the right thing.
You've had your share of franchisors griping at you and have even cease and desist letters, and then have actually filed lawsuits against you for being outspoken about their brand. So tell me a little bit about that.
My title could be franchise blogger / litigation defendant. So it kind of happened gradually where I would get these threats. I would always offer, hey, I'll tell your story. I'll tell your side of the story. If they're wrong, post this. And so early on, I didn't really understand backing up the way I do. And I got hacked. And, one company called me and offered money to take stuff down. It was a coaching company. And they said, hey, if you take the stuff down, we'll pay you $4,000, $5,000, something. And I said, no, I don't do that. And so then they went back, and I had somebody inside the company who was sympathetic to me later on came and said, yeah, I was in the meeting where they said, nah, he's not going to. One person took the money. He said, this guy won't go for it. So they spent the money on offshore hackers. If somebody's going to go to that trouble, there's usually something that they're hiding. The next one was a little more serious, sort of. This guy, he was a founder of Butterfly Life, which is a Curves knockoff that had gone under. And he had a whole history of all kinds of litigation in the health club. Linda Evans, the actress, had started a health club with her. She had sued him. I had written about the demise of that. I'd worked with franchisees. And this was 3 years later. He wanted to start some new venture, but he wanted to clean off the negative stuff off the internet. And so he got some personal injury lawyer to sue me for defamation, and which was interesting because I hadn't written about him for 3 years. And the statute of limitations, I think at that time, was 2 years in California, maybe 1. So he had to make up a post. And this is what people need to realize about these, what we call slap lawsuits, is there doesn't have to be any kind of basis in truth. They can sue you anyway. And so he just invented a blog post, say, for April 1st of that year. And this whole thing was like, well, he published this post of April in this year and it defamed me. The actual post that he referred to, I think, he never even had to give the post. And this brings up the concept of a SLAP, which is strategic lawsuit against public participation is what a SLAP stands for. And it's basically referring to a lawsuit that is never they don't intend to win it. They don't intend, it's meritless. They just want to bully a critic to the point that they'll take the stuff down, and they just want to cause them pain and suffering and hardship and stress and economic distress to the point where they'll take the stuff down. And luckily in that case, he sued me in California, and California has a long established anti-SLAP law that basically says, if you're going to sue somebody just for bullshit reasons, you don't really have, we're going to stop the process right up front, and both sides can sort of show their cards early. And if it's a SLAP, if the judge rules that that's what it is, it's not merit, there's no merit to it. They're just trying to shut you up. The plaintiff has to automatically pay the defendant their attorney's fees. And that's what happened.
Well, listen, I mean, it's to your credit that you haven't backed down. I mean, you stand by your work. You stand by these franchisees that have been maligned by this franchisor. And there's credit to be given in that, because I think many people would have just crumbled or taken a settlement by now.
It's a great book. I love this book, David and Goliath, Malcolm Gladwell. If you had a chance, I'll send you a copy, where he talks about David and Goliath situations where actually his premise is that David actually has the upper hand in that scenario, both from historically that people think, oh, he only has a slingshot. Well, that slingshot was a deadly weapon that they used to hunt with. But he uses that as a thesis. Gladwell is so good at that, to go through and say, hey, if you're the David in those situations, there's factors at play that people don't realize. And one of them is he talks about the bombing of London, Second World War, and how the Germans had thought they could break the will of the English people just by carpet bombing London, and that every time they would just get weaker and weaker and more depressed and despondent. And the funny thing was, every time somebody survives one of those attacks, they start thinking they're invincible. Like, hey, I survived that one. It is stressful, and I feel like I've lost a year of my life dealing with this. But at the same time, you learn a lot. We're writers, and as writers, we don't get to pick our lessons all the time. This isn't even like those lawsuits are against me and unhappy franchisee, but they're really against franchisees' right to warn people. And there's nobody really to stem this massive miscommunication and deception of people who they just want to own their own businesses.
There's a lot of risks for franchisees that I don't think they realize when they're talking to that broker, all the great things about a franchise.
And they have all the money, all the franchisees' money to use against the franchisees, to use against you.
Right. And they do. And that's a huge reason why franchisees don't speak out. I hear from prospective franchisees who have not chosen a brand yet, who say, well, I've called all these former franchisees and none of them will talk to me. And I said, well, what does that tell you? That would be a major red flag for me. And I'd be looking at item 3 of the FTD, like who's suing who? What kind of litigation history do we have here?
Yeah. And even item 3, there's all kinds of loopholes that they don't have to disclose if somehow they won.
Who defines the word material? They only have to disclose material litigation. All right. Well, I mean, the FTC has defined it, but who's going to go look at that?
I've long argued that there's no one franchise industry. There are two franchise industries, and we are dealing in this realm of mom and pop, people who are 1, 2, or 3 locations. Maybe they dream of building a little thing, but they're operating out of their home. And then there's corporate franchisees where somebody owns 250 KFCs or 200 Applebee's, or they've got those. And these are companies that they've got attorneys, they've got accountants, they've got HR departments. It's really a different ballgame. It's really, and I think a lot of times people, they use that side of it. Look at franchising. Look at how successful it is and how great people who own a McDonald's and people who own Wendy's and people who own these things are doing. And they use these, even the bogus statistics are like, well, franchising has this great success rate, which is always a lie. But just even if you look at the success of franchises like that, they have nothing to do with things being sold in Entrepreneur Magazine, the next hot new franchise. And there is a vending industry, and there's a lot of money that's made through vending. It's not made by some guy who's got 2 machines in his garage or basement who's going to go place healthy vending machines at a school. It's like there are vending companies. They've got trucks. They've got people going around servicing them. It doesn't mean that you're going to buy 3 healthy vending machines and place them and make a living. And that's the same with all these service businesses. You might be able to make a go of it, but you're probably going to be better off doing it yourself, because it's not like McDonald's where people are driving down the road and they're like, oh, there's a McDonald's. It kind of sucks, but I know what I'm going to get. I know the menu. Get a tree cut down. You're just as likely to go with somebody local as you are. You know you're going to pay more for the brand. Maybe it'll help. Maybe their systems help. Maybe they don't.
Even buy local is changing nowadays, because we're finding that a lot of these home services brands are being bought up by private equity. Joe Jackson's likeness, who's been in business for 15 years, fixing sinks and toilets, and he has a good reputation in town. Well, that's what private equity is buying. So then they can take advantage of the local business. And then we have no idea that it's actually owned by a huge corporation. We still think we're dealing with Joe Jackson, the plumber that came to our grandmother's house.
That's a great point about false badges of credibility, I'll say. And which I'm sure is a favorite of yours, which is people need to realize there are no franchise awards that are valid, and there are no rankings of franchises that are valid. There's no award. I don't care. If you look at most of the awards, you take a look at the award and who's giving it. Most often it's the brokers saying, oh, this is our best new franchise based on how many we've been able to sell. That was one of the Donut Envy ones. Oh, it was fantastic. That was 2 years ago, year and a half ago, and they're no longer signed up for commission, so they're no longer fantastic.
Yeah. It was the same with responsible franchising. That should be the baseline. Your base should be being a responsible franchise.
Take a look at when somebody says, hey, we won all these awards. To me, that's a red flag, because you don't see McDonald's going out and saying, we were ranked number 1 franchise of the even the Entrepreneur 500, which has got the bigger name, much less Best Fran or whatever.
These are pay to play. A lot of them are pay to play. I don't think people realize that. And the other thing is that the FDDs that they're using are outdated. They're using last year's FDD because as the new ones don't come out until spring of the following year. And you could have an entire franchise fail in that year till the next FDD comes out, or if even one comes out, and you wouldn't know it. You're still, oh, this is a great franchise, but they're no longer selling, they're out of business, or they just lost 50% of their franchisees.
Donut Envy is a great example that I'm publishing the latest FDD. And, the first FDD said there's no failures. And then they continue with the no failure thing, which there absolutely were. And there were people left out of it. The second one they did cop to. I published the failures the week or two before they had to issue their new FDD, preempted because I knew that it was going to be sketchy. And so I kind of confronted them with the stuff that I knew. And then all of a sudden, they didn't come out with their new FDD for like 6 weeks. They had to go dark for 6 weeks. And then they came up with most of them. It's a completely different story than was told in the last one. And even like this lawsuit, they didn't disclose it. There's a lot of that stuff where nobody's reading it. It says on the cover of the FDD, no agency has read this. Nobody's checking this thing. So you really can't rely on what's in there. For most legitimate franchisors, the stuff checks out. Then there's tricks like you have to make sure that you look in the transfers and count that as an exit as if it's a failure, because you don't know. A lot of the tool companies, for example, people that don't have a fixed location, they'll transfer a territory. Somebody might fail in Minnesota. They'll just say, oh, we'll sell the territory to somebody coming in Arizona. We'll count it as a transfer. So much of that is there's really no sheriff in town, and you have to do your own due diligence. If you go by, hey, VetFran, they love veterans. They've got American flags everywhere. They're founded by veterans. It's a great story. But you got to look at it, like, what do people have to do to qualify to be in that list on VetFran? And all they have to do is pay VetFran a fee. And it's not much. It's like $700 maybe. And they have to offer a discount off their franchise fee for veterans. I've yet to talk to a veteran who lost $500,000 or $300,000 who ever said, oh man, thank God I got $1,500 off my franchise fee. No, I'm going through this with Entrepreneur Magazine. They came out with 150 best franchises for veterans, specifically veterans. Donut Envy was in there. They've got a whole list. They've got a whole list of veterans who went out of business with it, including one who went bankrupt and lost his house. What was that training F46 or F8 or F46? It's like a training thing. It's one of the biggest disasters in franchising in recent years. They've been investigated by the government, by the FTC. It's just a complete mess. They've got that in there. They've got a bunch of them that are just take some time. I mean, if you're going to pretend to be patriotic, at least pretend a little better. So what have been some surprises that you've had since you started going more full into the advocacy and truth-telling?
There's two. So getting my first cease and desist letter.
Congratulations.
I know. Yeah. I've hit the big time now. That's what Ian Carroll says. He's like, you hit the big time now. I'm talking about your document and what it's missing. And how am I defaming you? So that was kind of eye-opening. And then also the free speech issue. Like, I am exercising my right to free speech. Oklahoma has a really strong anti-slap statute that I'm grateful for. I haven't had to use it, but just the audacity of the franchisors there to just, we don't like what you're saying about our document, so we're just going to try to shut you up. And I mean, you understand it. Little guys like us, we have big mouths and big reach with our keyboards, but we don't get paid to do this. We're doing this on our own time, our own dime, and trying to help people not be defrauded. And then you've got franchisors that are just actively trying to shut your mouth.
Yeah, I had a great one. I published I think it was a New Jersey-based chain, and the CEO had gotten indicted and had pleaded guilty to taking money. He was taking franchisee money. He was making the franchisees paying cash for their cold cuts and stuff. He was skimming money off there, not paying tax. It was a federal indictment, and he had pleaded guilty. And I published the press release from the Department of Justice, and I mentioned some wording of what he did, and his attorney called me and said, "Take this down. I'm going to sue you. That's defamation. You're defaming my client." And I'm like, "What's defamation?" He said it. I was like, "That's an exact quote from your client, from his allocution. And he goes, I don't care. That's defamation. And I actually contacted the prosecutor and he responded. I'm like, what am I missing? I'm, and he's going, just, ignore him. He's an idiot, And, yeah. And that was a guy who later on called me up and threatened me. He told me that he was representing School of Rock CEO, and he called me up and said, either you're going to take this down about my client or I'm going to destroy you personally and professionally. This is the kind of stuff you had to look forward to. And I was like, you're going to destroy me? Like, attorneys don't talk like that. I mean, that's attorneys, they're smarter than that, especially to talk to somebody like me. And he goes, yeah, I know about, your DUIs. I know about your unpaid child support. I know he goes through this litany of just horrible, despicable things he knows about me. And I'm like, are you sure that you want to go with this approach with me? And because I actually happen to still be married to my first wife. I never had any child support payments. I've never had more than a speeding ticket. And I certainly have never had a DUI. He's like, well, this is what's happening. I'm going out. So it turns out that he had some research assistant or a paralegal or somebody dig up this dirt on me and pulled up the record of the wrong Sean Kelly.
Right. I was going to say, like, how many Irish Catholic Sean Kellys could there be out there?
Yeah, it is funny because that was the second time somebody alluded to that, but didn't really do their research. I called him on it. I said, okay, go ahead and do what you got to do. And I contacted the private equity parent company of School of Rock and just asked them, hey, do you guys sanction, is this, do you guys approve these guys threatening a blogger like this? And amazingly, their general counsel responded like on a Friday night. They never respond. And, with an apology, and we'll look into it. And by Monday, the CEO was seeking new employment. And obviously the attorney had gone with him, but, they had fired the CEO for putting him up to it. And, this guy in Franchise Times wrote to their credit, Franchise Times wrote a piece about it, even though this attorney was one of their legal eagle guys who was in their Hall of Fame legal eagle, nonsense. But yeah, they don't care. It's just like, they don't even think. They just threaten, bully. They don't care. They move on to the next thing. It's just like the current administration just throw stuff out there.
Let's just see what sticks. Yeah, throw it all out there. And for my thing, I took my stuff down, but only because with this particular franchise, I knew that they were being investigated by 3 different state regulatory agencies. So the trash is going to take itself out. So I'm just like, all right, my job is done, really.
You have to pick your battles, and maybe somebody can get lucky and back off on something, but not usually. Usually it's going to be karma's going to come and we're going to help it any way we can. And they just never know. It's like it could be a blog based in Poland all of a sudden appear and start publishing. You're kind of playing with fire. I've made sure that everybody who substantially came after me regretted that decision.
This guy, he went even to the point of telling his franchisees about my past and, oh, why would you listen to a pseudo reporter with a checkered past? Or his exact wording escapes me. In that moment, I recognized he's not going to be the last person to bring up things that have happened in my past. Yes, I had to go through a bankruptcy. It happens in business, but to me, that puts me in a much better position to talk to people because I've been through the worst of it. I know how to get out of it. And there's great insight to be had there. So I just turned around and listen, if you guys want to play dirt, I'm just going to lay all my cards on the table. So here's a public blog post about me and what I went through, just kind of as a cautionary warning to any other franchisor that wants to try to come after me personally. My stuff's already out there. I mean, well, you're not going to out me here. I outed myself. No shame here. My platform is all about transparency with franchisors. Like, you need to be more transparent in your documents. So I can't very well preach transparency on them if I'm not going to be fully transparent with my readers.
And the funny, I was laughing earlier on about them going to their franchisees, because that's what, especially in this last Donut Envy thing, they go to their franchisees and they say, there's this guy, he's telling all these lies about us and he's saying these lies. So we're sitting on them and don't worry, we're going to protect the brand. And it's like, the people you're talking to are the people who said those things. It's like, you're telling the franchisees that it's a lie. It came from the franchisees. They say that we're vacationing in NASA. They were flying private jets to Nassau while you guys are starving, and those jets weren't private.
Did you notice that it's always a handful of disgruntled franchisees don't represent the full group of franchisees? It's just a few.
They don't want to follow the system and they don't want to put the work in, because it's really believable that people are going to put their homes on the line and put a massive amount of money, and they bought a franchise so they would have a system when they could have started it on their own if they didn't want to follow a system. But no, they're not following the system, and forget the fact that 60% of them are failing. Then at the same time, this was a great one where at the same time, the broker selling this thing, and he was posting on Facebook that franchises have a success rate of 98%, that 2% of them fail.
I think I remember that. I was like, what are you looking at?
When I joined franchising, I even used it. I used it. There was this one statistic that everybody used, and it didn't even make sense. The statistic didn't even make sense. It was like more than 69% of independent businesses fail in some amount of time. But at the same time, the U.S. Department of Commerce has said that fewer than 5% of franchises fail in the first 5 years. It was like it didn't even match. The impression was that if you buy your own start your own business, you're going to fail, and if you buy a franchise, you're almost assured to be successful.
It's this history of franchising that I feel is really kind of lost to the new generation of franchising, be it brokers, new franchisors, advocates. It's because there's really only 3 people that advocate that I know of that have been doing this for decades. So there's you, Parada, and then Keith Miller. And Keith Miller, I know very well. He does a lot with the regulatory side of things. Kim Parada, he's great in the trenches. He's super supportive of individual franchisees. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've, cried on the phone to him, or he's such a great support person in franchising that I think he's really underrated when it comes to the rest of the franchise world. I don't think they really understand what a positive impact he has on franchisees who are in crisis. And so you guys are the top 3 that really kind of shaped what I do as kind of the newer generation coming in and doing this. And I think it's really important that we understand the history of what it was like 20, 30 years ago. I'm a huge believer in that if you don't learn history, you don't understand it, you're going to repeat it. And I see some of the same themes being repeated now in modern times that we already experienced a decade or 2 ago. And so that's why I think it's really important to have these conversations with you guys who have been around for a long time.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I would add Joel Labava, the franchise king. Joel is a funny guy. He's got this kind of the franchise king shtick, which I like to kind of poke fun at. And like a lot of these people, I realize I've known him for years and years. I've never even met him in person. He's out of Cleveland. Where he's interesting, if you look at it, watch his videos, his father was a franchise broker. He's like second generation, and he was a franchise broker. So he really is. He has great stuff about brokers, and he was a broker, and he tried to do it. He tried to do it as ethically, and he has told me that you can't do it. It can't be done. It's too much of a conflict of interest, like you were saying with your friend. It's like there's going to be a point, where you're just going to have to go, do I want to eat this month? Or there's a whole nother aspect of this, which is, and this is, I was part of this in that we were putting together new franchise programs. There's also a huge number of people who are convinced to franchise their businesses and to launch these new franchises. If you go to an IFA show, I haven't gone to one in years because I would need bodyguards. People are there, concepts are there. You go a year later, 2 years later, they're not there anymore. They've been sold on how easy franchising is and just a way to make money. And a lot of these people they have no idea when they get into it. It's how hard it is and how difficult. And
well, I think when they go into it thinking that they're going to keep their lights on by selling franchises and collecting franchise fee and not having happy, profitable franchisees paying you royalties, that's where they go wrong, because it's not sustainable if all you're going to do is sell, and collect the franchise fees. It's just not.
That's the other warning. So that's another huge warning sign. It's like, if this thing is so profitable, why don't you have 25% or 50% company owned? Why does one fail? Why don't you take it over and run it yourself if you've got the answer? And we haven't even talked about this whole semi-absentee scam. If these are semi-absentee where you can just put a manager there and you don't need an owner operator, why aren't these companies just doing it themselves and reaping the rewards because they're making the money off the franchise fees?
Yeah, it's much more lucrative to do it that way. And then of the ones I've seen that maybe do have one or two corporate locations, you look into the financials and find out that they don't have to pay royalties and advertising. So right off the bat, they're saving right there. So you're not comparing apples to oranges when you look at an item 19 that has an owner corporate affiliate listed.
Absolutely. So, and you look at what are the situations there. So like for this Donut Envy one, they use it for the item 19. Well, they happen to have a long-standing relationship with a college where reportedly $100,000 of this is coming from that they're parked at this college, that other people are not going to have that relationship. They have a brick and mortar store, which is not clear whether the sales of that are being included in there. And they've been around for 20 years, 15, 20 years. And there's a lot of times there's like that, like Experamax was one that had, the sales weren't all through the store. They had this corporate relationship with a big company and they were doing all their corporate account. That was the bulk of their sales, but they were pretending like this was all people coming in off the street to get their computers repaired. There's a lot of ways, and a lot of these guys, it's all if they don't have more than 2 or 3 solid years of experience, they might just be riding this wave, sell until the word gets out and reap that and then move on to another one and start selling that one. But I'll tell you, I really appreciate your site, and your analysis is like really excellent. And I stumbled into this by accident. You came in of your own accord with your eyes open. If I had known what I know now, I probably would have still done it, but
well, we'll see how I feel after I get sued a few times. I don't know. Well, fingers crossed that never happens. And I try to be very careful. So your website's unhappyfranchisee.com. They can check you out there. Now, I do want to bring in, you do have a GoFundMe. Litigation expenses are high. And if anybody wants to donate to your cause, where can they go to do that?
Actually, right on the site, there's a contribute section on there. I have done some GoFundMes, but this way, some people are concerned about whether it's going to be anonymous or whatever. But yeah, absolutely. I've got to do something about, I got a $1,200 bill I've got to pay, which is just painful for your own deposition. And there's more expenses and just trying to keep this up. And so, yeah, if anybody can donate, it's much appreciated. And people don't realize how important it is what you're doing, what I'm doing. Not just for these specific, but to send a message that franchisees, they're customers. What other industry says that customers are not allowed to leave reviews or not allowed to share their opinions? I mean, imagine in the 60s when the car companies were trying to shut down information coming out about, defective engines and gas tanks exploding. If Nader and those guys hadn't stepped up and pushed for that, we wouldn't have cars that were safe. And if one comes out that's not, somebody's going to report on it. And we live and die off of consumer reviews. And this is what people don't realize with franchising. This is what it amounts to, that we're giving franchisees a chance to share their opinions and their information. And that's what's at stake.
Well, Sean, I really appreciate you taking the time today. And we will talk soon, I'm sure.
All right. Thank you. Keep up the good work.